My name is Tom Marshall. I am the son of Harry Marshall. My father, Harry Marshall, served in the Second World War in the front lines in Holland and England. He was very patriotic about his country, and he felt that he would be an excellent soldier, being the athlete that he was. Even though he was a very small man, he was very quick and very sharp mentally. And he wanted to get and help his country win that war. So he volunteered to join that war when he was 18 years old. He couldn't wait to get over there and get in the front lines. First World War, my mother's father was in that war. He served in India. He was a lieutenant in India. That would be my mother's father. And he served also in the front lines as a lieutenant. And there was a story that he told us where fighting in India, I think a lot of the war was fought in trenches, and it was hand-to-hand combat. And he, being a lieutenant, was leading a group of men into battle. They were in a trench, and he gave the order to get out of the trench, run a couple hundred meters to the next trench where the enemy was awaiting, and to jump in the trench and fight hand-to-hand combat with a bayonet or whatever tool they had for fighting. So my grandfather gave the order to jump out and led the charge into the next trench and jumped in the trench to discover all the enemy were dead. There was no life in there. And he turned around and his troops did not follow him. They were too afraid to come, and he had no idea that he was leading a charge by himself. The rest of the men were still in the hole. So that shook him up, but that was the story I always remember my grandfather told me about India. I know he rode in a Jeep, and that's where we have the photograph of two of his buddies that served with him in uniform. We have that photograph of the three men, my father and his two friends. Those three men were riding in that Jeep, and it struck a landmine, and the Jeep exploded. All three men were throwing out of the Jeep with the explosion, and the two buddies were killed. My dad's two close friends from the war were killed instantly on impact. My father thought he was, well, my father was injured. He was laying face down, yelling out that I'm hit, I'm hit. And the men coming behind, the other Canadian military were coming behind, and they found my father laying there, and he was concerned that he had quite an injury there, and they said, Harry, I think you're okay. Your jacket's ripped open, but I think your back's all right. What happened was my father had picked up a heavy leather jacket off of a dead German soldier. And apparently that would be quite common over there because of the cold weather, and if they needed extra warmth, it wasn't unusual to take something like that. So he took a heavy-duty leather jacket, and he claims that's what saved his life that day, because the back of this leather jacket was torn to shreds. He did suffer a back injury that put him actually out of the boxing ring for about a month and a half, but he recovered from that injury, and we think that's probably what saved his life. But that was quite traumatic, obviously, for my father to lose his two friends in that manner. And that was one story that he shared with us, but he very seldom would talk about the bad side of war, because it just left a huge scar there. That was the scariest part in his life. There were moments that he has never been so scared as during that war. One story that he told us is, during combat, everybody would have a turn, would be designated to be night watch. So they were in the field, near or in the front lines, and during the night, all the men in his group of soldiers, all these soldiers were sleeping in a barn. My dad was on night watch, and some big gun, would lay there on watch during the wee hours of the morning with this big gun in front of him and watching for the enemy coming in. So there he is by himself, night watch, and pitch black outside apparently, and he heard footsteps coming towards him. And he was terrified. This is the enemy coming in on top of me. What do? He was in a position that he couldn't really get any of the soldiers or arouse them during the sleep. He basically had to lay there still, hope that they passed by, or he would open fire. He was waiting to try to see something. So these footsteps got closer and closer and louder, and my dad was sweating bullets at this time. And it got louder and louder, and out of the black came a horse. It wasn't the enemy, it was a horse coming. So that was one story, so that was a relief. Another thing that he said that he's terrified was that you would be going through a wooded area, and you would hear, I think my brother calling it 303 shells going through the leaves. And that would be a sniper would be up in the trees or somewhere hidden, and you wouldn't know what direction or where these bullets are coming from. But here they are, sort of sitting ducks in a forest with bullets ripping through the leaves and not knowing where to shoot back at, where to return fire, because you could not tell where the enemy fire is coming from. That was another upsetting position that my father was in during the war. Well, I think he would say, you know, you're living in this great country of ours. It's I think, the best country in the world. And you know, if you can give something back to your country, give it back. You know, too many people are complaining, or you know, maybe they've come from another country and they'll complain that, you know, Canada doesn't have what they had at their old country. Well, you know what, you're in this country now, it's got a lot of good positives. You know, do something for a country. I think that's why he went to war, because he felt obligated that I'm living in this country and there's a war, and the country needs my help. And that's why he went over there, and you know, because of people like my father, we're in the position we are today. He helped, you know, along with all these other great vets. So I think he would just tell young people to count your blessings, respect people, especially people that with the experience that have been around. You know, so many people that I see today that maybe were around back in the 60s at my dad's boxing club, they're aged, and I see these men, and I know those guys, including my father, were great athletes. They don't look like it today because they're elderly, they're in their 80s, and maybe they've had some medical battles, but these men have the experience and the wisdom that they got during their lifetime, and I think you know, people should respect that, and maybe slow down a little bit for these people and take a minute to hear what they have to say. For me, it's a time to acknowledge and to remember that we wouldn't be here today, and we wouldn't be living the way we live today if it wasn't for these people who sacrificed their lives in some cases for that. And the people who did survive the war, like my father, there's emotional scar they carry for their life in most cases. And again, like my dad, doesn't like to talk about it because it's probably rehashing some things he doesn't want to remember. But I know it affected my dad through his life. He was very happy-go-lucky, relaxed, most relaxed guy you'd ever meet, that had a great sense of humor, that would be always laughing, see the funny side of things. But really, deep down inside, it hurt what he went through. And so I will respect that for Remembrance Day and every other day of the year.